Hello, Internet. I am Azurin Wraith, and I am here to entertain. This is Vintage Story 1.2 Lore Update The Journey. My goal is to uncover that lore. I'll search ruins, caves, and even ask the locals what they know in order to figure out what is going on in this post-apocalyptic, eldritch-infested world. Unfortunately, survival is pretty much impossible without food and proper equipment, which means I can't even begin excavating ruins or exploring caves until I've at least reached the late Copper Age. So, step 1. Choose a class which will optimize my ability to uncover lore. In other words, I'll be a clockmaker. The downside is I will have weak bones and anxiety, but I can work with that. Step 2, homesteading. Water was everywhere, so all I really needed was good soil, and holy crap did I luck out. High fertility soil spotted on day 2. Plus, the landmass would be easy to fortify with a bit of landscaping. So I set up camp, and on day 3 got to work on the croplands and a dirt hut. I immediately messed up the spacing of the farmlands, and without a bucket, I wouldn't be able to fix this mistake until later. I thought I would be safe now that I had a roof over my head, but I woke up to a rift practically outside my door and a pack of drifters ready to brawl. I managed to survive this time, but clearly I would need better defenses. Unfortunately, armor would have to wait. Instead, I wanted to focus on the extremely good news that my new land came with a whole herd of pigs. I immediately dug some animal pits and started chasing them in. Okay, they mostly chased me, but the point stands that at the end of the day, they were the ones in the hole and not me. I even caught some chickens and rabbits as a bonus. Now, step 3, resources. Obviously, food was the most important, so I needed to gather as many crops as I could. More importantly, I needed to get my animals into pens so I could increase their numbers. I wouldn't actually be able to start breeding them until I reached the late copper stage, but I also wanted to make sure wolves wouldn't wipe out my entire herd. So I chose to build a 2-block high platform for the pens. Moving the animals turned out to be trickier than expected, and I ended up getting killed by one of the pigs. Yeah. After that mess, I decided to keep the animal pits as they were, just in case they caught anything else. And in case I needed a quick save from wolves. And you know what? I liked the raised platform. It got me thinking about base design. What if I raised all my buildings up by 2 blocks? I could have pathways between each platform for easy travel through the base, and as extra protection against wild animals. I could even have bridges to travel between each raised build. You know what? In my head, that looks pretty cool. But that was another task that would have to wait for the late Copper Age. My lack of advanced tools was really holding me back. So I decided to focus on my next task and improve my storage. The reed chests weren't cutting it anymore. I needed clay pots. Thanks to foresight, I'd been marking my map anytime I saw something useful, and I already knew there was red clay nearby. I then got a bit carried away, making molds for tools, because without copper, they were no better than oddly shaped pavers. But seeing as I still had extra clay at the end, I think it was fine to prepare for the future. And that future needed trees. Lots and lots of trees. Unfortunately, the nearest trees were guarded by a pack of wolves, so I had to travel around the lake to the next closest spot, which turned out to be an even better location because it had walnut trees and oak. I even got the seeds and nuts to plant more of them near my base. On returning, I immediately lit the pit kilns, and since they would be burning for a while, I decided to do some exploring. I then immediately changed my mind and tried not to die as both time and space warped to end my existence. I would have loved to fight the drifters. Really, I would have, but I wasn't the kind of crazy that would do it during a temporal storm. At least not yet. Eventually the world stabilized, and I decided to take on a few safer activities, like trying to kidnap wolf pups and fighting bears. Well, maybe fight isn't the right word. I agitated a bear, tricked it into a hole, and then jabbed at it from the safety of a dirt column until it dropped. Maybe in the future the pathfinding for the animals will be smarter, but for now I will take full advantage of how easily they fall into holes. Pockets full, I went back to my base. I did eventually return to check the traps, but I was met with tragedy. Luckily, the other pup was still alive and running around. Unluckily, I only had one source of meat to set the trap. This time it worked. I couldn't remember which trader bought wolf pups, so I visited all of them. Turns out no one wants a cannibalistic puppy, so I brought it home and put it in a pit before returning to resource gathering. While exploring some ruins, I found my first copper tool, a scythe. This was very exciting, because not only could I harvest cattails and tool faster, I could also mow my lawn. Never again would I have to meticulously cut every blade of grass with a knife. Or so I thought. Turns out the scythe only cuts the top layer of grass. I still had to cut the bottom part with my knife. Still, it was faster than before, so good enough. With the groundwork done, I was finally ready to advance to the next stage. The Copper Age. I'd managed to find a few nuggets on the surface, but without a pick, I would get nowhere. Also, I was getting really tired of walking around the lake to get wood, and swimming across wasn't any better, so I made a raft. I then realized that rafts do not come with oars and needed to go back and make one of those as well. Stepping into the Copper Age required 4 things, 2 of which I already had. A pickaxe mold and crucible, both made of clay, charcoal from the firewood, which I would have soon enough, and 20 copper nuggets. I filled a pit with firewood, lit it up to prepare the charcoal, and then grabbed my knife and a log to make a panning tool. I only needed a couple more nuggets to have enough for my first pickaxe. Then it was just a matter of heating, pouring, and cooling. I then headed to the nearest copper location and started digging. I found the vein, collected my prize, and headed back. I then did some rough math and realized I didn't have enough. I didn't even have the correct tool to break the copper chunks into nuggets so they could be melted down. So I decided to try my luck at panning again, and in a rare twist of fate, I actually hit the jackpot. Not in finding copper, that took all day, but I did find a temporal gear. They were supposed to be super rare, especially when panning. I immediately used it to set a respawn location in my dirt hut, which might have been a mistake. Maybe I should have waited until I had a house and put it in there. Oh well, the deed was done. I finally had enough nuggets for a hammer, and after breaking the copper chunks, I still didn't have enough. Crud. If I was going to reach the late copper stage, I needed an anvil, and I needed copper ingots. And I did not have enough for both of those. So I once again needed more copper. I also needed another pickaxe because this one would not last. Just in case, I made 2 of them. And I even tested out the mechanics of throwing hot metal into water to cool it faster. Conclusion? It works. I'm pretty sure the nearest copper location was depleted, so I headed for the next closest one. I hoped I would get enough because I had only found 3 sources of copper so far. At the very least, I wanted enough for the anvil and the ingot. With those, I would be able to make a saw blade, and then I would finally be able to level up my base. I lucked out. Again. The second location had even more copper than the first one. I had enough for the anvil, the ingot, and then some. In fact, if I went to the third location, I might have enough to make a full set of basic copper tools. The opportunity was too good to pass up. So I got on my raft and headed as far as I could before walking the rest of the way on foot. The third location had even more copper than the first 2. At this rate, I was starting to worry my luck was going to take a horrible turn at any moment. I'm never this lucky, and when I am, it can only mean something bad is coming. But ignoring that ominous feeling, I instead focused on the copper. I grabbed the clay molds I wanted, counted out the nuggets, and poured the molten copper into the molds. I would have slept through the night, except for the sudden temporal storm. The walls eventually stopped melting about the same time the sun came up. I thought it was safe, except one of the drifters was still polluting my pond, and it started chucking spikes at me. That was not fun. Thankfully, it disappeared rather quickly. Also, the wolf pup grew up, so I couldn't keep it anymore. More importantly, I now had copper tools, and I could finally make the saw, which would allow me to advance to the next stage. Just to be sure, I made 2 of them. And with that, the first hurdle is complete. I have successfully entered the late Copper Age. Thank you for watching, everyone. The next step is preparing for winter, so keep an eye out for episode 2. I do hope you have been entertained.